Hello class, this is chapter 4 over cells. We're going to go over parts 2 and 3 together. It'll go over prokaryotic cells and introduce eukaryotic ones. So prokaryotic cells are cells that are simpler than eukaryotic ones. They are smaller and they lack internal membranes. So nucleus, Golgi apparatus, ER, they're missing all that stuff. There's two domains of prokaryotic cells, bacteria and archaea. Visually, it's hard to tell the difference between them. Basically, we needed DNA sequencing data to be able to tell they're two separate domains. The archaea are slightly closer in structure and other ways to eukaryotic cells, but they are prokaryotic like bacteria. Another difference, archaea tend to be extremophiles, so they live in like really salty habitats or really acidic habitats. But bacteria live pretty much everywhere, including on and inside us, but pretty much everywhere. Soil, water, ocean, Arctic ice, pretty much everywhere. For prokaryotes, there are three basic shapes. There's a sphere, which we call a coccus. There's a rod, or it kind of looks like a long skinny pill called bacillus. And then there are two words for spiral structures, spirillum and spirochete. All cells have a plasma membrane, and it sort of defines the inside from the outside. So it is the outer limit of the cell. And then all cells have ribosomes. All cells have genetic material, so DNA. And all cells have a cytosol. So a cytosol is the water-based internal filling of the cell. Prokaryotes have some extra stuff. Besides those four, they also have a cell wall. And the cell wall determines the shape, but also protects them some. They also have a glycocalyx, which is sort of a sticky layer of sugars that sticks out from the cell wall. And it's usually with protection, or it's usually for protection, as well as forming colonies with other prokaryotes. So here you can see the three shapes, but we have more to talk about their structure. Okay, so this reddish orange layer is the cell wall. This light blue layer is their plasma membrane. So the cell wall is outside of the plasma membrane, and remember the glycocalyx sticks out from the cell wall, so this light orange layer is the glycocalyx, or the capsule. And again, the capsule is for protection, usually against antibiotics, but it also helps attach to either a host or each other. Another structure that helps with that are these little hair-like structures. They're called fimbriae. And fimbriae also help with attachment to host or each other. The nucleoid is a special word for the DNA inside the prokaryotic cell. It is not the same as a nucleus. So a nucleoid is not a nucleus. Oid means like, so it's somewhat like a nucleus, but there's no container. It's just the area of the cell where the DNA is. So think of an apartment with rooms versus like a loft apartment. The prokaryotic cell is like a loft apartment in that there's no rooms. There's not like a bedroom and a living room. Your bed is just kind of in a certain corner or a certain area of the loft, much like your nucleoid is. So your nucleoid is your DNA. It's just the area in that cell where the DNA is. The eukaryotic cell is more like an apartment with rooms, sort of a standard apartment, and you have your own bedroom where your bed is, and it's contained within that room. That's how a nucleus is. Sort of this light purple filling, that is the cytosol. And then the tiny dots, do I have another color? Those tiny dots are ribosomes, and they do protein synthesis. All right, besides that, we can have structures for movement, like the flagellum. The flagellum is this long tail, and that's for movement, moving the bacteria, but not all bacteria have flagella. So here's some definitions, but I've gone over most of those. The only one I haven't gone over is the pilus. It's sort of like a longer, thicker, stiffer fimbria, and it is used for exchanging DNA, essentially prokaryotic sex, where these prokaryotes can exchange DNA, usually in the form of a plasmid, which we might get to plasmids in the DNA technology chapter, which is a ways away. All right, eukaryotic cells are larger, and they are much more complex, and they have lots of internal membranes, including a nucleus and other organelles. Each organelle, the suffix L just means tiny. Organ means tool, but essentially it's tiny organs. So these organelles are inside the cells, so they're really small, and they do different functions for the cell, much like the organs of our body do functions for our body. It's thought that both the chloroplast and the mitochondria were bacteria that a eukaryotic cell basically ate and decided to keep as a pet. And I'll go over that evidence when we get to those organelles, the bacteria and the chloroplast. But there is evidence for that. I really wish they could explain the nucleus, but it does help explain the mitochondria and the chloroplast, and both of those are so important for energy, which is so important for life. So it had to happen pretty early on in our evolution. Based on fossils, we're pretty certain that prokaryotes came first. We're pretty sure Archaea was the prototype for the eukaryotic cell, and somehow it evolved a nucleus. ER and Golgi, possibly due to infolding of the plasma membrane. And one of the reasons we think that is because there's bacteria now that has these membrane infoldings that really resemble mitochondria. And they do aerobic respiration, much like the mitochondria does. And so we know this evagination, this infolding is possible. And so that's where the idea that how the nucleus and ER and Golgi evolved, or were formed, I guess is the better term. And when we look at those structures, the nucleus, the ER, and the Golgi, we can see that they're all connected. We can break up the organelles a little bit into the endomembrane system, and those are the organs I was talking about. The nucleus, the endoplasmic reticulum, and the Golgi are all part of the endomembrane system. The nucleus and the rough ER are physically connected. They're all continuous, but the Golgi and the ER are connected by vesicles that travel back and forth. And these vesicles are basically just packages of membrane with some liquid on the inside. And they can carry cargo either in that membrane or in that liquid. And so they're very good at transporting stuff back and forth, and that's how the whole system is connected. Anything outside that system is got other functions. So some of them are energy related, and some of them are related to the cytoskeleton. So here's a model of an animal cell. You'll want to be able to identify these organelles and tell me the function. And that's 80% of this chapter. And you'll need to know, again, the animal cell, the plant cell, and the bacterial cell. Here's the plant cell. The plant cells are more geometric often. So they may look like bricks or stained glass. Or sometimes I was looking at some fern tissue, it looked like a jigsaw puzzle. But animal cells are a lot more amorphous. They're a little bit harder to see their outline. And that's because animal cells don't have a cell wall and plant cells do. So that's those overall structure differences. And as we go through them, well, I'll talk about it now. So you need to be able to broadly compare the animal and plant cells and bacteria. And so remember, those bacteria don't have organelles, but they do have a cell wall. They do have flagella, and they have some other weird structures that the others don't, like fimbriae and pili, and the capsule. Plant cells have some things that animal cells don't. Plant cells have a cell wall. Which is like the bacteria. Bacteria also have a cell wall, so animal cells are sort of the odd man out on that they don't have a cell wall. The cell wall is slightly different between the plant cells and the bacteria. Another thing that plant cells have that animal cells don't is this large central vacuole. And you can see that in the micrograph here. Animal cells do have vacuoles, but they don't have a central vacuole. It's not that big, and it doesn't have the same function. So animal cells have smaller vacuoles, and they have numerous ones, not just the one central one. And then the last thing plant cells have that animal cells don't are the chloroplasts. And I kind of wish we had chloroplasts, but plant cells use chloroplasts to make sugar, to make food from sunlight, water, and CO2. So your chloroplasts do photosynthesis. And those are the three main structures that plant cells have that animal cells don't. Animal cells have centrioles. And when we talk about the cytoskeleton, I'll talk about them more. And I'll remind you that animal cells have centrioles and plant cells don't. And then bacteria, remember, they're very simple. Prokaryotes, they're very simple. They don't have any of these organelles on the inside, except for DNA in a nucleoid and ribosomes. They do have the internal filling, which is cytosol. They also have a plasma membrane, which all three have. And then they have those weird structures that just bacteria have. Alright, so that's it for the 4.2 and 4.3. Next, I will talk about 4.4 and 4.5.